Ever since I became the editor at Food Chemical News in early 2008, people have asked me, Jason, what foods are the most dangerous to eat? And I always answer that just about everything seems to have been the subject of one massive outbreak or another. So technically, all food is dangerous to eat, but you eventually have to eat something. You know, it's really surprising I haven't lost more weight since taking this job. Hello, I'm Jason Huffman, editor-in-chief of Food Chemical News. Welcome to the Knife and Fork Show. The truth is, there are a few types of food that do seem more difficult to keep safe than others. One of those is sprouts. Promoted and sold as a health food, these little guys have been linked to some really big outbreaks in recent times. Most notably, the massive outbreak of E. coli 0104 H4 in Europe in the summer of 2011 that caused 4,000 illnesses and 53 deaths. The sprout industry has been taking it on the chin ever since. In October, Kroger, one of the U.S.'s biggest supermarket chains, announced that it was stopping delivery of sprouts to all of its thousands of stores. But there is hope for sprouts on the horizon, thanks to some of the efforts being led by our guest today. Bob Brackett is the director of the Illinois Institute of Technology's Institute for Food Safety and Health in Chicago. Bob is somewhat of a celebrity in the food safety world. He worked 8 years at FDA, including 3 as head of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. He was also, not too long ago, the chief science officer at the Grocery Manufacturers Association, one of the food industry's most influential trade associations. Bob, what is it that makes sprouts so difficult to keep safe to eat?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one that I'm asked fairly often. And there's really a couple different things that make it of highest risk compared to other foods. First of all, like many others, it's a raw agricultural commodity, and so consequently people eat it without cooking. So if it does become contaminated, people are going to get whatever happens to be growing on it. The second part of why it's more risky is the way that it is actually grown or prepared. And often what we'll do is take sprout seeds and put them in an environment that's warm and moist, and a lot of times it may be even tumbling. So these are the conditions that are perfect for the growth of most foodborne pathogens.
So like a hot tub.
It's a hot tub. It is a sauna for them where they can have all the nutrients they need. They have the temperature. They have water. And so what we do is try to find ways not to necessarily make them sterile, but how can we prepare this food and make it safer? So in the point that you introduced this segment to, which is how safe is safe, it's really a continuum. So we're wanting to take sprouts so where they are now and make them much safer so that consumers can enjoy them, and perhaps develop some new technologies that can make them completely safer.
Now, there are different kinds of sprouts. Are all sprouts equally dangerous?
Another good question. When people talk about sprouts, they have different images of what that means in their mind. Typically, the sprouts associated with the outbreaks have been alfalfa sprouts, although sprouts, anything that you can sprout, you can actually make a sprout of. So this includes mung beans, it includes broccoli, it includes many variety of other types of products, and they're not all equally as susceptible as one another. And so a lot of study really needs to go to find out what one has to do for one type of sprouts as compared to another type of sprout.
You're doing some work now as a part of, I think, 2 different organizations or groups that are kind of related, correct?
That's correct.
To do something about this or to correct this problem. Could you talk a little bit about some of your efforts?
Sure. Well, the first one is what's known as the Sprout Safety Task Force, and this was a group of both industry, and it had the participation of our IIT scientists and microbiologists and FDA scientists, and the goal there was to try to find out what we could do to make things safer. How could we prepare sprouts in a more safe manner? What could the industry do by themselves to help with their members to make sprouts a safer product? And one tool that they came out with was what's known as the audit checklist. And really what this was a checkoff that individual sprouters could use to see how what they were doing compared with the recommendations of the Food and Drug Administration as really best practices for doing that. Now, the second organization that we're working with is known as the Sprout Safety Alliance. Sounds like the same thing, except the Sprout Safety Alliance is really meant as an educational effort to help the industry prepare for the new upcoming regulations under the Food Safety Modernization Act. So that's more compliance, but the Sprouts Safety Task Force is really looking at technologies or practices that could be done regardless of what the rules in FSMA might end up being.
The first effort that involved creating a checklist, where does that stand today? How many sprout growers have participated in that?
Well, we don't know. And I think that's one of the efforts that we really want to find out is when we've had these outbreaks, we don't know if it's because the sprouter hasn't been following the guidance that FDA issued, whether they just plainly have a sloppy operation, or whether there's something else going on. And so we'd really like to get a handle on that. But we know that if the sprouters do follow the checklist, they're going to be in a much better position to have a safe product than if they just sort of wing it and do as I've always done.
What happened in Europe? Are you familiar with the outbreak in Europe and what went wrong there?
Well, I don't know that anybody actually knows what went wrong. The last that I had heard is that the seeds that were used there may have been contaminated in international transit and cross-contaminated. But it took them a long time to find out what it was in the first place. And I don't know that anybody's...
It was in a salad, like one of those typical outbreaks where you start trying to figure out which ingredient caused the outbreak. And they went to the cucumbers first, I think, and they ended up at the sprouts eventually.
The Spanish cucumbers got blamed first, and then from then they traced it back to sprouts.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the effort that you're doing to determine how many sprout growers are following the checklist and how much of the industry is participating or doing that. What else is on the horizon? Anything else that we can look forward to?
Well, I think getting an idea of what sprouters are doing, what practices they're doing is important. Part of the problem with this industry is that there are no large companies in this. They're all very small, they may be localized, so it's very difficult for both us as well as the regulators to even sometimes figure out where the sprouters are even operating so that they can help them. And so consequently, they become sort of the weakest link for the entire industry, that if they're not doing something right, there's an outbreak, the entire category of foods gets a bad name.
Is there anything that retailers or even consumers can do to, if they're going to consume sprouts, to see or check or make sure that they're following as safe a practices as possible?
There's probably not much that either the retailers or the consumers can do if for something like alfalfa sprouts, you really don't know what's happened before you got them. The best advice that we can give and that FDA gives is that if you are a susceptible population, that you either avoid eating sprouts or you eat them in a cooked form. And that's one thing to point out too, is many of the sprouts are actually used in such things as Asian dishes where they're cooked, and they're perfectly fine in those sorts of situations.
Okay, great. All right, that's all we have time for in this segment, but stay tuned because Bob Brackett's coming back, this time to talk about some of the recent or coming innovations in food safety technology that have him the most excited.